I'm Millie Weaver, and you're watching the Millennial Millie Show. Well, the Los Angeles homeless crisis has only gotten worse in the past year. They're saying that the numbers just in Los Angeles have rose from around 40,000 people to now up to 69,000 people just in Los Angeles that are now homeless, sleeping on the streets in tents or just literally on park benches. It is absolutely horrific what's going on, but this is going on under the watch of Democrats. California, as we know, has elected routinely Democrat politicians. And what have those politicians done to address the homeless crisis? Well, the same thing they've been doing, which hasn't been working. And so you have to ask yourself, when these voters are continually voting in these Democrats, what are they expecting? Are they expecting anything to get done? Well, I've seen some recent video footage out of Los Angeles, and let me tell you, it is just horrific what's going on the streets out there. The video footage showing these homeless people, I mean, it is heartbreaking to see just the conditions that human beings in America are living under. I mean, there are stray dogs everywhere. There's graffiti. The streets just look dirty. There's people just sleeping in parks on the side of the street, their belongings and trash scattered all around the floor, people suffering from mental illness, disease, and just left to rot on the side of the streets. And what are the politicians doing about this? What are the Democrats doing about this? Are they going to do anything to address the fact that their own constituents, people living in their districts, are just suffering from a homeless problem? And it's not just the homeless people that are suffering, it's the businesses. These businesses are suffering with people keeping business away from their businesses by being out there doing drugs, having trash, literally peeing and pooping on the side of the street. And why are they having to pee and poop on the side of the street? Well, because many of the businesses won't let the homeless people use their restroom facilities. So it's just a downward spiral. I feel so bad. I feel horrible for the homeless people suffering from this. But the reality is that something needs to be done. But what are people like Joe Biden doing? Well, he's just busy eating ice cream at ice cream shops, talking about how wonderful the economy is. While American people across the country right now are suffering from overly high food prices, overly high gas prices, and homeless crises in their own backyards. It's disturbing. So check out this clip of Joe Biden and how lackadaisical he seems, how concerned he seems about America right now.
Are you concerned about, just one more economic one, are you concerned about the strength of the dollar right now?
I'm not concerned about the strength of the dollar. I'm concerned about the rest of the world. Does that make sense?
Can you explain that?
Yes. Our economy is strong as hell. The internals are. Inflation is worldwide. It's worse off everywhere else than it is in the United States. So the problem is the lack of economic growth and sound policy in other countries, not so much ours. And that's how it's worldwide inflation. It's consequential.
So did you hear that? He's more concerned about what's going on in other countries than what's going on in the U.S. right now. And that's a bit of a problem. I'm wondering if people are starting to catch on as to what Trump really meant when he said, put America first, right? America first. What did that mean, right? Was that some white supremacist or racist saying? No, it was, let's take care of the American people first. Let's put Americans' needs first, not people in other countries. That's the job of their leadership and those people in that country. But Biden isn't very concerned about what's going on right now. In fact, he's just walking around eating ice cream all day, which I guess they say is good for people with dementia. So, I mean, more power on him. But my goodness, this is the man who we have as our president right now while people are suffering. It's clown world, okay? This is clown world. Meanwhile, the Democrats are sticking true to that, where they want to put people from other countries first above American citizens, because we all know that California has been providing free health coverage and health care for all illegal immigrants. So people from other countries can come to America and expect to be treated better than American citizens sleeping on the streets in Los Angeles. And mind you, many of those sleeping on the streets in Los Angeles are actually veterans. You heard that right. Many of them are veterans who served our country. And oftentimes what's going on in California, it's a homeless crisis, but it's also a mental health crisis. Many of the people on the street are also suffering from mental health crises as well as drug problems. There's a massive drug epidemic as well. And it's really affecting business owners across the board in Los Angeles. But here's a news piece out of Sherman Oaks just to illustrate how bad it is out there right now for people living in those areas and businesses.
Sherman Oaks, California.
You think I'm playing when I say you gotta die? You really gotta die. You gotta die.
The homelessness crisis.
You gotta get your half-naked ass out of my restaurant right now.
Has business owners closing up shops and employees fearing for their safety.
They come in, tweaking out and things of that nature. So, you never know what you're gonna get here on patrol.
They've dealt with fires caused by the unhoused, aggression on a daily basis.
I found another woman's head in a flag.
I fear for my staff. I fear for my guests. I don't know from one day to another what's going to happen.
Like this man who openly defecates on Ventura Boulevard, and on this day tosses a bag of his bodily waste onto business owner Paul Scrivano's SUV.
Every single day.
So what we have mental health crisis. Clearly some of the people in that video, you could tell, are suffering from mental illness. But then also you have people having to defecate in the streets. Why are they having to defecate in the streets? Well, because one, they're homeless. They don't have a home to go to the bathroom in. But also the businesses, because these homeless people are oftentimes mentally ill, deranged, or smelling horribly because they are not able to shower or bathe themselves because they don't have access to a shower. They don't let them into their businesses because they don't want it to scare off their patrons. So they're left to defecate and go to the bathroom outside on the side of the street. And so this is causing tension amongst business owners and the homeless population. So what do we do about this? What is California doing about this? But mind you, we also have to address the mental health crisis, because you could say, let's just give all these people homes, give all these people jobs, and it's not really going to fix anything if many of these people are actually suffering from severe mental illness. Okay, so you have to address the mental health problem. Well, part of the issue is that a lot of the mental hospitals were all shut down. And so many of these people who typically would have been in a mental institution getting medical care, getting care with specific medications or drugs that would actually help manage their condition and then help them re-enter into society under those medications and under care of a therapist or psychiatrist, they aren't having that. They're not having that. And oftentimes the homeless people then are just being criminalized and being put in prisons anyway. So let's go over this clip here so you guys can really get a good idea of what has caused this problem in California.
Helped to inspire the deinstitutionalization movement that started in the 1950s and hit its stride in the 60s.
The time has come for a great national effort. Nearly half of the 530,000 persons in our state mental hospitals are in institutions with over 3,000 patients, getting little or no individual treatment. Many of these institutions have less than half of the professional staff required. 45% of them have been hospitalized for 10 years or more. If we launch a broad new health program now, it will be possible within a decade to reduce the number of patients now under custodial care by up to 50%.
Mental hospitals started emptying out and closing down. But critics say deinstitutionalization was a disaster, dumping thousands of mental patients onto the streets with no plan. Even Saz criticized the way deinstitutionalization unfolded.
He thought it sort of doubled the injustice that those people were not offered the choice to stay. This is their home they're being thrown out of now. So he thought that was wrong.
The number of psychiatric hospital beds available dropped by 95% between 1955 and 2005, according to the Treatment Advocacy Center. Starting in 1960, as the mental health population in hospitals declined, the number of mentally ill people in jails and prisons shot up. A 2011 Supreme Court case filed against the California Bureau of Prisons revealed that some mentally ill inmates were held in telephone booth-sized solitary cells. Some reformers say it's time to cast aside Thomas Szasz and his attack on the mental health establishment.
I gotta say,
So the mental institutions, because they were actually, back then in that time period, they were violating the rights of some of the patients there, and they were forcing them to undergo very controversial and unethical medical treatments, right? They decided, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater and shut it all down, which isn't necessarily the best approach, because still you have mentally ill people who are suffering from schizophrenia, hallucinations, delusions, violent thoughts and tendencies, suicidal thoughts, and they still required mental health. It's like, hey, why don't you just tell them they're not allowed to violate these people's rights and force certain medical procedures on them and force unethical medical procedures on them? You think that you would just do away with those type of procedures if that was the problem. But see, I think that wasn't necessarily what their entire goal was. And I'm going to get to the point here with what I'm talking about in context, and that is that they perpetually allow the homeless crisis problem so that they can continue to collect funding on behalf of the homeless population, which they then never actually put towards the homeless people, or they put barely any of that money towards the homeless people. So it's a way for money laundering to be generated, and many of these politicians to pad their own personal pockets in the name of helping homeless people. Meanwhile, the homeless problem in California has just gotten so bad.
This issue has now been embedded as part of the LA brand, where in the ways that we think about Los Angeles as being a place with sunshine and traffic, that homelessness is now one of the parts of living here, regardless of where you live.
It is everywhere. Homelessness in LA is everywhere. There's not a neighborhood that hasn't seen it. There's not an overpass that doesn't have it. There's not a park that hasn't experienced it. It's everywhere.
The situation is more urgent than ever before. The problem has grown to be visible in every single neighborhood in Los Angeles.
It's near our schools, near our work, near our parks. It really affects everybody.
We've all seen homeless in our neighborhoods, onto the freeways, in downtown Los Angeles, right outside City Hall, which continues to astonish me that our elected leaders can walk downstairs to the street outside their offices and see people in tents, and they've been there for years and they're still there.
Homelessness in LA, after the 37 years that I've been directly involved with it, is worse now than ever before. After Bill.
So, as you can hear clearly in this video, these Democrat representatives are literally just walking past the piles of tents and rubbish right out front of the City Hall, right outside of their government buildings, and choosing to ignore the crisis and choosing to pretend like they're doing something. Meanwhile, it's affecting neighboring businesses, schools, neighborhoods, communities. It's actually posing a public health hazard. Apparently, many diseases like typhus, tuberculosis, and other illnesses, medieval diseases, are making a comeback amongst California's homeless population. So when you have people living outside on the street amongst human waste, filth, urine, and just disgusting living conditions with rats, you impair immune systems and you then start to see these medieval diseases that were eradicated, start to pop up amongst the population. That is affecting the neighboring communities, the schools, the businesses. I wouldn't want to be walking around in sandals along these Los Angeles streets, that's for sure. So it's posing a hazard to the community. You can't just think that, okay, you know what, if they're homeless, that's their problem, that's their choice, they have the right to be homeless, and let's just leave it at that and let these people just fend for themselves on the street, because you can't have the city posing a public health hazard to the people in the city. So you actually have to do something to address this, because it's not fair to businesses, it's not fair to neighborhoods and schools. You actually have to figure out a real solution here. Democrats have tried to claim that they've been having solutions, but no, they don't actually put any real solutions forward. Instead, they've just decided they're going to criminalize the homeless population. So Senator Brian Jones has announced a new bill banning homeless encampments near schools and parks. So they're just going to ban the homeless encampments. Well, where are the people going to go? I mean, do you expect them to literally just disappear and vanish? Because if you have all these cities banning them, which, look, you should not allow people to camp and have tents on the street and poop and pee on the street. You should actually not allow that. But where are they going to go? You need to actually come up with a solution. And so right now, you actually see this infighting amongst Democrats, where the Democrat lawmakers, establishment are wanting to just ban it. And then the actual Democrat activists are saying, well, hold on a second here. You can't just criminalize people for being homeless and not come up with a real solution. Check out Democracy Now's footage where they're addressing this fight, this turmoil amongst the Democrats.
The march towards criminalization, that is the strategy. In Los Angeles, it's an anywhere but here strategy. It's an out of sight, out of mind strategy. It's a funding of the police department to solve a social crisis. What we saw in City Hall, not just this meeting, but the meeting before on August 2nd, was the voices of houseless people, the voices of civil rights organizations and tenants organizations saying enough is enough. This new expansion is on the back or on the heels of a revised ordinance 4118, which we consider an ordinance or enforcement by a tape measure. And so pre this expansion, LA City Council had already voted that if anyone was near 10 foot of a driveway, they would be in violation of this ordinance. Within 10 foot of an operational building, whatever that means, they would be in violation of this ordinance. Within 2 feet of a fire hydrant, they would be in violation of this ordinance, right? And so what they've done is to just put a finer point on their intention to criminalize folks out of the city of Los Angeles. The other thing.
So they're really concerned because they realize that this is not an actual solution. All you're going to be doing is relocating all these homeless people into the prison system, into jail, because they can't afford to live somewhere else. They have to live on the side of the street. They don't have a place to go, so you're just going to scoop them up and throw them in jail. Once again, it's not a real solution, and it's not like the California government isn't getting massive amounts of money. Now, one thing that's also really interesting about this particular story here was, which we don't have time to get into all the minutia, but the activists who were actually going into that city meeting, the city council meeting, and speaking up about the criminalization of the homeless population, those Democrat officials were comparing them to the January 6th insurrectionists because they were coming up and speaking, and they were referring to them in a way that we would almost hear how they refer to moms coming up and complaining at school boards. And so now you see the Democrats, these activist groups, starting to worry about whether they're going to be demonized and criminalized by the FBI for speaking out against the Democrats or against the establishment. It just goes to show that it's not necessarily about conservative group versus left-wing group. It's if you're going against the establishment and they don't like what you're saying and you're calling them out, they then start to say that you're an insurrectionist, you're some kind of a terrorist or criminal. But let's talk about how much money these Democrats in LA have actually gotten for the homeless crisis. Well, they've actually gotten tons of money, okay? So an audit on the Los Angeles spending found that a $1.2 billion program that was intended to quickly build housing for the city's homeless residents was spending up to $837,000 to house a single homeless person. What? That is so insane. They found that most of the units are studios or one-bedroom apartments. The audit found 14% of the units built exceeded $700,000 each. What? That's more than most of your guys' houses listening to this. More than my house, for sure. And one project in pre-development is estimated to cost almost $837,000 per unit. What? This is insane. That is called money laundering. That is called inside deals with contractors. That's not normal. And that is not a solution to address the 69,000 people in Los Angeles right now sleeping on the streets that are in need of immediate housing. It reminds me all too much of the scam with Black Lives Matter, right? And how Black Lives Matter raised $80 million that they said that was going to go to help Black lives, but that money ended up going to mansions for their leadership and being misappropriated, being spent on, transgender dancers and other random people and things that weren't what the donors had signed up for. Sharon Osbourne even came out and said, I want my money back, because she had donated $900,000 to the Black Lives Matter scam. Many celebrities did. Many people did. They thought that it was going to actually go to help Black communities. Wouldn't it have been nice if some of that money actually went to help many of the Black lives that are homeless on the streets in California right now? Wouldn't that have been nice? I mean, there's plenty of people of color that are homeless in Los Angeles right now that they could have used that money for. And it's almost like it's like pulling teeth to get California to actually spend the money that they say is going to help the homeless people on the actual homeless people. It's so bad that LA residents actually sued the city, and the city is now agreeing, after having been sued by the residents, that under a settlement, which must be approved by the council, the city would spend $2.4 billion to $3 billion over the next 5 years to provide 14,000 to 16,000 beds. So the people actually had to sue business owners, people being affected by the homeless crisis. They were suing the city saying, hey, you're not doing anything to help these people. We're going to force your hand. So we'll see if the city actually does something with that. Well, their solution, this new controversial solution, is that they're going to just put the homeless people in hotels alongside guests. Doesn't sound like a very permanent solution to me. It sounds extremely temporary, and hotels can be very expensive. You're paying per night, and it's going to be bothering the hotel guests. And how many hotels are going to want to offer up their hotel facilities, which then potentially might run off their patrons or their customers? Not an actual solution. But see, you would think that they've got think tanks full of Democrats and people in power that could come up with a real solution. Like, they have all this brain power, all this intelligence. They've been educated at the finest liberal arts universities, but they can't come up with an actual solution. I've come up with a solution. And hey, it might not be perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than what they're coming up with. And this is my solution. Okay, because look, you can't just go from having a person that's homeless on the street, sleeping in a tent, might be even on drugs or mentally ill, just into a suburban house with a car and a job. Okay, you have to take steps. So the immediate solution would be, look, a campgrounds Okay? So I, for one, I love RVing and I love going to campgrounds. And when I was actually young and didn't really have much money to my name or anything, I had a camper trailer and I went to campgrounds and I would stay at the campgrounds in my camper trailer. And it was a nice situation for me, intermediary to getting into a home, right? And actually buying a home. And so at campground facilities, they actually have community restrooms with community showers, okay? They have laundry facilities. They have oftentimes little office areas with computers and desks. So they even often have tent sites for people to actually pay to camp with their tent there. So how hard would it be for Los Angeles or for the state of California to set aside some of the state-owned land there, build a nice campgrounds with electricity and power and actual campsites, and allow for the people to legally camp there? The people would have toilets, so they wouldn't be going to the restroom on the floor or on streets. They would have toilets. They would have showers. They could clean themselves with hygiene. They could use laundry facilities. All the social workers and social services would know where to go. They would just go straight to that campground and they would be able to help the people there. They could even have security there, right, to ensure that the guests are safe. In fact, you could even go so far as to have two separate camps, or have it separated where you could have women in one, men in another, so that you don't have women being sexually assaulted. Women are being sexually assaulted on the streets of LA at alarmingly high rates right now. And this is a serious issue, okay? And oftentimes they don't have the right to carry, the right to even have a gun to protect themselves, because California is Mr. Anti-gun state, okay? So women are very vulnerable, especially children. There are homeless children on the streets. So you have to come up with a real solution. That's my solution. I think it's a heck of a lot better than what they're coming up with, but it would allow people to be at a place. You could even set up lockers so their stuff wouldn't be being stolen and robbed all the time. That's one of the issues. Homeless people are constantly being robbed. Their stuff is being stolen. They can't keep track of anything as far as having an ID or any of their personal effects, because it's just sitting out there on the side of the street. They're forced to sit next to their stuff. That's why they can't go get a job, right? Many times they can't go get a job because they don't have an ID. They don't have the paperwork, but they also can't leave their belongings to go to an actual job because they're likely to get it robbed, all right? So, there are real solutions out there. It took me not very long to come up with that, all right? And it's not perfect, but what they're saying is that they're just going to keep throwing money randomly at the people while they're sleeping out on the streets. The money goes towards essentially scooping up all the tents, taking all their belongings and tents to the dump, and putting the homeless people in jails or prisons for being homeless. And then also, we're going to pay for them to be in hotels, or we're going to pay to actually build apartment units that cost $700,000 to $800,000 per unit. What? That's insane. We can't afford that, especially with how many homeless people there are. This solution I've come up with would be very financially feasible, because it wouldn't cost that much to immediately house a bunch of homeless people there. And you could even have shuttle buses that would take them to and from the city if they wanted to actually get jobs, right? You could have social workers going there, helping them get jobs, all kinds of things, okay? They're not doing it. Why are the Democrats not doing it? I'll tell you why they're not doing it. Because they're stealing the funding. They keep getting the funding to address the homeless crisis, billions and billions of dollars that they're laundering into their own pockets. If they don't have a homeless crisis anymore, if the problem's fixed, they can't justify getting more money. It's a scam, it's a scam, it's a scam. And that is the truth, guys. It's a scam. All right. What the Democrats are doing is absolutely a scam. And so this is why elections have consequences, guys. You have to get out there and vote. You got to get out there and vote for the midterms. Hope this was an educational show for you guys. I'm Millie Weaver, signing